Welcome back to The Deep Dive. We're the show that takes these incredible sources, unpacks them, and, well, hopefully gives you some real insights you can use.
That's the goal.
And today, we are diving into something truly profound, a book that genuinely changes lives. I know people who say that. We're talking about Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning.
It really is one of those essential reads, isn't it?
Yeah.
From the 20th century, but maybe even more relevant today. It's got this unique power because it's two things at once, really.
Right.
It's this incredibly raw, firsthand account of surviving Nazi concentration camps. Just harrowing. But then it's also the foundation for his whole school of thought logotherapy, meaning-centered therapy.
And that combination is just electric. This isn't theory cooked up in a comfortable office somewhere.
Not at all.
This is philosophy, psychology, tested in the absolute worst conditions imaginable. Which brings us right to the heart of our deep dive today. How do you find meaning? How do you hold on to it when life throws, well, the unimaginable at you?
It's the ultimate question, framed by the ultimate test.
Yeah.
And while Frankl's context was extreme, that question, finding meaning amidst suffering, touches all of us, in our own struggles.
Absolutely. So before we get into the book itself, let's talk about Frankl, the man behind it. Who was he?
Viktor Frankl, born 1905, Vienna, lived right through almost the entire 20th century, died in 97. And apparently, he decided he wanted to be a physician when he was just 3 years old.
3. That sounds almost like a legend, doesn't it? But his intellect, it seems, was genuinely off the charts from early on.
Oh, absolutely. As a teenager, he wasn't just, reading philosophy and psychology. He was diving deep, psychoanalysis too. And get this, he started corresponding with Sigmund Freud while still in high school.
Wow. Freud himself?
Freud himself. And Freud was apparently so impressed, he actually sent one of Frankl's papers to the International Journal of Psychoanalysis. It got published. Frankl was 16.
16 years old, publishing in Freud's circle. That's astonishing. It speaks volumes about his thinking even then.
And that same year, age 16, he gave this lecture, a philosophical lecture. And he said something that really became the core, the absolute bedrock of everything he later wrote and lived.
What was it?
He said, "It is we ourselves who must answer the questions that life asks of us, and to these questions we can respond only by being responsible for our existence."
Responsibility. Answering life's questions ourselves.
Exactly. Meaning isn't just out there waiting to be found like a treasure. It's something we forge, something we build through how we respond, how we take responsibility for our lives. And he believed this long, long before the war.
That's such a critical point. So his ideas about meaning, about the will to meaning, as he later called it, they weren't born in Auschwitz?
No, not at all. He was already developing logotherapy before his deportation. The camps. They became the terrible testing ground, the crucible, really. He had to see if his own theories held up. Could he find meaning? Could he maintain his inner freedom under those conditions?
It became the ultimate validation, not just academic, but
existential validation. That's the term he used. His survival, his observations, they proved in the most visceral way possible that the human spirit can find purpose, can endure. If it has a why, it turned his ideas from theory into, well, undeniable truth, lived truth.
And that lived experience, I think, is what gives the book its staggering power and credibility. It's why logotherapy isn't just another psychological theory.
Absolutely. Reading his account of Auschwitz, it lends this immense weight to the logotherapy section. It's like, this isn't just speculation. This is wisdom earned through unimaginable suffering.
It's like learning about survival from someone who actually survived the shipwreck, not just someone who studied the ocean charts.
A perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And the book's structure reflects this. Part 1, experiences in a concentration camp. Raw, immediate, devastating. It sets the stage. Then part 2, logotherapy in a nutshell. The framework, the theory, distilled from that experience.
And interestingly, he initially wanted to publish it anonymously.
He did. He didn't want the focus on him. He wanted the message to stand on its own. That life holds potential meaning in any circumstances. Universal applicability. That was key for him. Though, obviously, knowing it's his story adds that incredible layer of validation we talked about.
Right. Which brings us to our mission today. We want to go deep. Really unpack man's search for meaning. Not just summarize, but analyze the core ideas, see how they connect, look at the controversies or different takes, and pull out things you, listening right now, can actually think about or maybe even use.
We'll look at how he survived, sure. But more importantly, why he survived, what kept him going. And what does that tell us about finding our own meaning, our own why today?
Okay, let's dive in. Part 1, experiences in a concentration camp. Frankl breaks down the psychological journey of the inmates into 3 phases. Phase 1, Shock. He says it started almost immediately.
Yeah, the arrival. He paints this chilling picture. Silence at first on the train platform, then bam, shouts, harsh commands. He talks about the guards' voices, this rasping hoarseness, like the sound itself was violent, dehumanizing.
And in that chaos, he had this brief, almost bizarre moment of optimism, seeing some other prisoners who looked okay.
Right, it's the human tendency, isn't it, to grasp at any hope. He saw prisoners in stripes, heads shaved, but they seemed well-fed, even laughing, and his mind just latched onto it. Maybe I can get into their position. It was a desperate, irrational flicker of hope before the abyss.
Which was immediately crushed by the finger game.
Brutally. Instantly. The first selection. An SS officer points left to right. Life or death.
Yeah.
90% Frankl estimated from his transport went left. Straight to the building marked Bath. A lie, of course.
To the crematoriums.
To the crematoriums. He asked someone where his friend went. The guy just pointed at the chimney belching flames into the polar sky. Floating up to heaven, he was told. Just stark like that. The illusion shattered.
And then the stripping away. Not just possessions, but identity itself.
Completely. Undressed fully, everything confiscated. Shoes, maybe a belt, a truss if you were lucky. Frankl had his manuscript, remember? His life's work, ready to be published.
He tried to keep it.
He pleaded. Showed it to another prisoner, this capo, a prisoner put in charge. This is my life's work. The response, shit, just like that. And Frankl knew that was it. His entire former life, his identity as a scholar, a doctor, gone. He had to strike out his whole past, a psychological annihilation.
Unimaginable. And with that loss, the thought of suicide must have been overwhelming for many.
Almost universal, he says, in those initial days.
Yeah.
Just pure hopelessness, wanting out. Frankl made a conscious promise to himself that first night he wouldn't run into the wire. That was the term for touching the electric fence.
A deliberate choice, even then.
A deliberate choice. And he made this chilling observation. After a few days, the gas chambers almost lost their horror. Because, in a way, they offered an out. They spared you the act of suicide.
A truly horrifying thought about the depth of despair.
Yet even in that hell, some kind of survival wisdom emerged, like the advice about shaving.
Yeah, from an older prisoner.
Yeah.
Shave daily. Look fit for work.
Why? Because if you look like a Muslim, that was the camp slang for someone sick, emaciated, utterly broke, and incapable of labor.
You were marked for death.
Immediately. The SS would just point you out. Gas chamber. So, looking fit, even if you felt like death inside, was a survival tactic, a literal performance for your life.
In this first phase, it wasn't just physical shock. It was emotional, psychological torment, the longing for home, the disgust.
Overwhelming. The boundless longing for family, the constant inescapable filth, vermin, rags for clothes. He talks about this mortification of normal reactions, like new arrivals forced to clean latrines, getting splashed with excrement. If they showed disgust, wiped it off. Beaten by a capo.
Systematically breaking down every natural human response.
Exactly. Leading to this blunting of feeling. He saw prisoners watch punishments, even killings, totally unmoved. He mentions a 12-year-old boy with frostbitten toes carried into the sickbay. Nobody reacted, just apathy. Their own survival demanded shutting down empathy.
Which leads us right into phase 2, the entrenched routine. And apathy becomes the main symptom.
Right. But it's crucial to understand, this apathy wasn't just giving up, it was a defense mechanism, a necessary shield, dimming the horror of reality so you could focus everything on just staying alive, preserving yourself and maybe your closest friends.
That sigh he mentions, well, another day is over. It says so much.
It captures that state perfectly, living moment to moment, tunnel vision on survival.
A regression, he called it, cultural hibernation, like everything that makes us human beyond basic survival just went dormant. Art, intellectual life, deep relationships.
Shut down. Reduced to the barest essentials of existence. Except, he noted 2 interesting exceptions. 2 things that didn't hibernate.
What were they?
Politics, strangely enough. Constant talk. Mostly rumors. Wild speculation about the war, about liberation. It was a kind of psychological lifeline, maybe. Fleeting hope or sometimes deeper despair. But it was engagement.
And the
religion. A surprisingly deep, sincere religious interest. Improvised prayers in the huts, in cattle trucks during transport. He saw this unexpected vigor of spiritual life, holding on, even strengthening in the face of utter desolation.
That's fascinating, and his own experience during the typhus outbreak really highlights this inner life aspect, doesn't it? Winter 1945.
Yeah, terrible outbreak, high fevers, delirium, people couldn't even pray coherently. Frankl knew he had to fight to stay conscious, avoid succumbing. So what did he do?
He started rebuilding his lost manuscript.
In his head, at first. Composing speeches, structuring arguments. Then, incredibly, he managed to get tiny scraps of paper and started scribbling down keywords. Just focusing on that future task, that purpose, bringing his life's work back into existence, gave him the mental strength, he believed, to survive the physical illness. That why kept him anchored.
Which leads to that really counterintuitive point he makes. Sometimes the sensitive intellectual types, the ones you'd think were least physically suited, actually had a better chance of inner survival.
It's a paradox, isn't it? But his explanation makes sense. They had richer inner lives. They could retreat mentally, find freedom in their thoughts, their memories, their spiritual space. A space the guards couldn't touch. Physical fragility, but profound inner resilience.
Like finding moments of beauty, he describes this too. Amidst the horror.
Absolutely stunning moment, seeing the Salzburg Mountains glowing at sunset from a filthy train car. A sunset through the woods in Bavaria. He remembers another prisoner yelling for everyone to come look and someone whispering, "How beautiful the world could be." Acknowledging beauty even then, a spark of the human spirit.
And his own spiritual moment, hacking at the ice.
Powerful, forced labor, freezing cold. He's talking silently to his wife in his mind, grappling with the meaning of it all. And suddenly he feels his spirit break through the gloom, a victorious yes to life, to purpose. And right then, a light goes on in a distant farmhouse. A bird lands right in front of him. He thinks of the Bible verse, "Et lux in tenebris lucet."
And the light shineth in the darkness.
Exactly. Finding that inner light, that meaning, even in the deepest darkness. It wasn't just about physical survival. It was about spiritual survival.
And love played a huge part in that inner survival, didn't it? Not just physical presence, but something deeper.
A profound realization for him. Love, he saw, transcends the physical.
Yeah.
Its deepest meaning is in the spiritual being, his inner self. Whether his wife was alive or dead, whether she was physically there, it almost ceased to matter. The idea of her, the love itself, the inner connection that was the anchor, it couldn't be broken by separation or even death. It was an inner reality.
Incredible. And yet, amidst all this internal struggle and occasional transcendence, there was this bizarre outer reality of camp culture. Cabarets.
Grotesque, isn't it? But yes, improvised shows in the huts. Jokes, songs, tears, a desperate grab for a moment of escape, of feeling human. People would trade precious bread rations to attend. That's how vital it was. He mentions prisoners singing Italian arias for extra soup. Art as currency, even there.
And didn't he say his applause for a poem saved him once?
He believes so. Applauding a poem recited by the murderous capo, this notoriously brutal prisoner guard. His genuine appreciation, he felt, might have spared him from this capo's usual cruelty. Art, even in that twisted environment, had power.
These small moments of relief really underscore his idea of the relativity of suffering, don't they? How perspective shifts entirely.
Absolutely. Prisoners would envy actual convicts. In regular prisons, they had toothbrushes, mail, mattresses, or they'd envy those working indoors, out of the mud and freezing wind. It wasn't about finding joy. It was about escaping agony. He called it negative happiness, borrowing from Schopenhauer.
Freedom from suffering.
That became the highest form of pleasure imaginable. Just the absence of pain felt like bliss. Think about that. Positive pleasures were tiny miracles. Getting peas fairly distributed by the cook, a slightly less brutal guard. He even talks about calculating whether getting sick, reporting to the infirmary, was worth it to avoid a particularly deadly work detail. Constant, desperate survival math.
All while the environment itself was designed to strip away your value, your ego, your freedom.
Relentlessly, the constant message, you're worthless, expendable. The danger was becoming just part of an enormous mass, losing your individuality, descending to animal life, as he put it. Seeing prisoners eyeing the coats of the dying Muslims, that stark reality of survival instinct overriding basic decency, being totally dependent on the guards' moods. It eroded your sense of being human.
But, and this is crucial, he insists there was always a choice, a final freedom.
Always. The freedom to choose your attitude. His own example is so powerful. He had a chance to escape with a friend. Everything was set. But he felt this unpleasant feeling. It wouldn't go away. Until he decided to stay. Stay with his typhus patients. He was their only doctor, choosing responsibility over escape. And the moment he made that choice, he felt this incredible inward peace. That, for him, proved it. You can't control the circumstances, but you can't control your response. That's the ultimate human freedom.
A profound choice. Which brings us to phase 3. Liberation. The end is near, but it's chaotic.
Utter chaos. Anticipation mixed with unreality. The SS are fleeing, mass transports are happening, desperate plans are being made by the prisoners left behind. Frankl remembers dreaming of freedom for 3 long years. picturing it joyfully.
But a reality wasn't quite like the dream. He talks about a death in Tehran moment.
Yeah, like the fable where trying to escape fate leads you right to it. A Red Cross delegate arrives, says, no more evacuations. Huge relief. Then, hours later, the SS show up with trucks. Orders to clear the camp. Prisoners to be exchanged in Switzerland. Frankl's group gets left behind almost by accident. The doctor counting them off was just too tired to continue. They missed the transport.
And that transport.
They were taken to another camp and burned to death in log huts. Frankl and his group only survived because of that exhausted doctor. Sheer, terrifying randomness.
And then suddenly, it's over.
Just like that. Cannons firing nearby. They wake up one morning, white flag flying over the camp gate. The front lines had reached them. Freedom.
But the psychological impact wasn't immediate joy, was it?
No. Depersonalization, he called it. It felt unreal. Like a dream they couldn't wake up from. They'd imagined freedom so intensely for so long, the reality felt flat. Meaningless almost. The body reacted first ravenous eating, years of starvation catching up. But the mind took longer. Then came the talking. An uncontrollable need to talk, releasing years of pent-up trauma.
And Frankl's own return, finding out he'd lost everyone.
Devastating. Back in Vienna, 1945, his wife Tilly, his parents, his brother, all murdered in the camps. He was completely alone. Profound depression, naturally, yet he made this remarkable choice.
To stay in Vienna.
Stay. When so many other survivors left Europe, he felt this connection, this responsibility maybe, and incredibly, he committed himself to reconciliation, not revenge. He famously said, I do not forget any good deed done to me, and I do not carry a grudge for a bad one. He rejected collective guilt entirely.
He believed even the perpetrators had potential for change.
He did. He believed in that spark of freedom, that capacity for responsible choice, in everyone, even, as he put it, the vile Nazi criminal. Just like he believed the core personality wasn't touched even by severe psychosis. That fundamental belief in human potential, against all evidence sometimes, is central to his work.
And he threw himself back into work almost immediately.
An explosion of activity. It was clearly his way of processing, of finding meaning again. In 1946, he painstakingly reconstructed The Doctor and the Soul, the book he'd lost. And then in just 9 days, he wrote Man's Search for Meaning.
9 days.
Astonishing, isn't it? It poured out of him. It wasn't just about publishing. It was about giving meaning to his own survival and offering something to others, grappling with that post-war inner emptiness he saw everywhere.
A living example of his own principles, finding purpose through creation and contribution. Which leads us perfectly into part 2, logotherapy in a nutshell, the theory itself. So, boil it down for us. What is logotherapy at its heart?
Logos, meaning. So it's meaning-centered psychotherapy. Frankl's core idea is that our primary drive as humans isn't the Freudian pursuit of pleasure or the Adlerian striving for power or superiority. It's the will to meaning.
We're fundamentally driven to find a purpose in our lives.
That's the engine, according to Frankl. Our deepest striving. Everything else, pleasure, power, they might be side effects, but the main goal, the thing that makes life feel worthwhile, is meaning.
And he backed this up, right? It wasn't just his intuition.
No, he pointed to evidence. Polls in Europe showing huge majorities, like 89% needing something to live for, over 60% saying they'd die for it. And that Johns Hopkins study of students, 78% saying finding purpose and meaning was more important than making money.
So it's a verifiable human need, not just a philosophical idea.
Exactly. He saw it as empirical. And logotherapy also makes this important distinction between real values and pseudo-values. Things that look like meaning but might just be covering up other issues, neurotic conflicts maybe. He warned against psychologists who just want to unmask everything, potentially dismissing genuine spiritual striving as something else.
Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, essentially. Recognize authentic yearning for meaning when you see it.
Right. The unmasking should stop when you hit something genuinely human, like that will to meaning.
Okay, so if this will to meaning is our primary drive, what happens when it gets blocked? Frustrated.
That's where Frankl introduces existential frustration. And this can lead to a specific kind of neurosis he called noogenic neuroses.
Okay, break that down. Noogenic.
From the Greek nous, meaning mind or spirit. These neuroses don't originate in the psychological realm, like traditional Freudian conflicts between id and ego or childhood trauma. They arise from the spiritual dimension, the specifically human dimension concerned with meaning.
So it's not a conflict within the psyche, but a conflict about existence itself. A crisis of meaning.
Precisely. It's feeling that life lacks purpose, that sense of inner emptiness we talked about. And Frankl argued this was a growing problem, distinct from older forms of neurosis, and needed a therapy, logotherapy, that addressed this existential spiritual dimension directly.
He had that great example of the American diplomat, didn't he?
A classic case study. High-ranking diplomat, deeply unhappy with his career, U.S. foreign policy. He spends 5 years in traditional psychoanalysis. The analyst insists it's all about his relationship with his father, the government as a father figure, etc.
Standard psychoanalytic interpretation.
Right. But logotherapy saw it differently. Frankl, or logotherapist, identified the root cause not as unresolved father issues, but as genuine vocational meaninglessness. The guy hated his job. He yearned for something different.
And what happened?
He finally made the switch, changed careers, and bingo. Contentment, fulfillment. Frankl actually questioned if it was ever really a neurosis at all. Maybe it was just a healthy human spirit reacting appropriately to a meaningless situation.
Which implies that not all suffering or dissatisfaction is a sign of mental illness.
Crucially important point for Frankl. Existential distress, questioning life's worth, feeling despair about lack of purpose isn't necessarily pathological. It might actually be a sign of spiritual health, a sign you're grappling with the big questions. The doctor's role, then, isn't always to medicate it away, but to help the person navigate that existential crisis of growth.
Help them find their hidden logos, their meaning. So logotherapy isn't just about digging into the past.
Much less so than psychoanalysis. It has an analytical component, sure, making things conscious, but it's focused on uncovering existential realities and, most importantly, future potential. What meaning can you fulfill? What responsibilities are calling to you? It's forward-looking.
Okay, that leads into another key idea. Nuodynamics, which sounds complicated, but it challenges a common goal in therapy, right?
It does. It challenges the idea that homeostasis, a tension-free state, is the ideal for mental health. Frankl disagreed strongly. He said we need a certain amount of tension, healthy tension.
Like stretching a muscle.
Exactly. That's nuodynamics, the tension between who you are now and who you could become or ought to become, between what you've achieved and the meaning you still have to fulfill. This striving, this reaching, Frankl believed, is essential for psychological well-being. Avoiding tension isn't the goal. Finding the right tension, the tension connected to meaning, is.
Which connects directly back to that Nietzsche quote.
He who has a why to live for can bear almost anyhow. That's the motto for nuodynamics, really. That why creates the healthy tension, the pull towards the future, that makes enduring the difficulties, the suffering possible, even meaningful.
And the concentration camps were the ultimate horrifying proof of this.
Tragically, yes. Those who had a strong sense of future purpose, seeing loved ones again, finishing important work, bearing witness, they had a statistically better chance of survival. Frankl cites studies from other POW camps, Japanese, Korean, Vietnamese, all finding the same thing. Purpose is protective.
His own manuscript reconstruction being the prime example from his life.
Absolutely. That desperate need to rebuild his work, even just mentally at first while battling typhus. It gave him that why. It created that life-sustaining tension, pulling him forward, helping him endure the how of the illness in the camp. Don't try to eliminate all tension. Challenge yourself with meaning.
But what happens when people don't find that meaning, when the why isn't there? That's the existential vacuum, right?
Yes. The flip side of the will to meaning. When that will is frustrated, you get this void, this inner emptiness. Frankl saw it as a major affliction of the 20th century, and arguably it's even more widespread now.
What did he see as its roots? Why was it happening?
He pointed to a twofold loss, unique to modern humans. First, we've lost the animal instincts that automatically guide behavior. An animal knows what to do. We have to choose. Second, the traditions of religion, community values, social norms that used to provide that guidance are rapidly fading.
So, no instinct, no tradition. We're kind of adrift.
Exactly. Adrift in a sea of freedom, which can be terrifying. So what do people do? Either they conform, just do what everyone else is doing, or they become susceptible to totalitarianism, do what powerful figures tell them to do. Anything to fill the void, to avoid the anxiety of choosing for themselves.
And he saw this more in American students than European ones back then.
Significantly more. 60% versus 25%, he cited. He thought maybe the U.S., being younger, more dynamic, had shed traditions faster, leaving more people in that vacuum.
And how does this vacuum manifest? What does it look like?
Primarily boredom. A profound, gnawing boredom. He coined the term Sunday neurosis, that feeling of depression or meaninglessness that hits when the distractions of the work week stop and you're left alone with the emptiness inside.
That weekend dread some people feel.
Precisely. And Frankl believed this boredom, this underlying meaninglessness, was a root cause of many modern psychiatric problems, more than specific stressors even. It fuels depression, aggression, addiction.
It makes sense. If life feels empty, you might try to fill it with anything: substances, violence, extreme ideologies.
Or just chronic apathy and despair. Think of the no future rhetoric sometimes associated with drug use, or his 1930 study on unemployment neurosis. People weren't just depressed because they lacked money, they were depressed because they lacked purpose. Giving them meaningful volunteer work alleviated the depression, even if their economic situation didn't change.
Man does not live by welfare alone.
His famous line, he connected meaninglessness directly to alcoholism. 90% of alcoholics studied felt that deep void. Drug addiction, 100% felt life was meaningless. So if finding meaning can prevent suicide and addiction, logotherapy becomes a vital preventative tool, not just a treatment.
Which brings us to maybe the most challenging, but also most powerful part of logotherapy: how it deals with suffering, guilt, and death. The tragic triad.
Right. This is where his concept of tragic optimism comes in. It's not naive optimism. It's saying yes to life in spite of everything, in spite of the unavoidable pain, our inevitable mistakes and guilt, and the certainty of death.
How is that even possible?
It's about transforming the negative, finding meaning within the suffering. It's the human capacity, he argued, to turn tragedy into triumph, predicament into achievement. Think of his examples. The invalid finding meaning in facing death bravely. The camp martyrs being worthy of their sufferings through their courageous attitude.
But he's very clear, suffering isn't required for meaning, right?
Absolutely. Crucial distinction. Meaning is possible despite unavoidable suffering. If suffering can be avoided or removed, the meaningful thing is to do that. Suffering for its own sake is masochism, not heroism. It's only when suffering is inescapable that the challenge becomes finding meaning in our attitude towards it.
He also critiqued our modern obsession with happiness, didn't he?
Yes, citing his colleague Edith Weisskopf-Joelson. This pressure to be happy all the time actually makes people more miserable when they inevitably face hardship. They feel unhappy, they feel ashamed of being unhappy. It doubles the burden.
His own deepest camp moment ties into this, doesn't it? Losing the manuscript, then finding that scrap of Hebrew prayer.
The Shema Yisrael. It felt like a direct challenge to him, not just to think about meaning, but to live it. His question shifted from, will I survive, to, does all this suffering have a meaning? That became the central focus.
Like the rabbi in the story he tells, purified by suffering.
Yes, becoming worthy through his endurance to join his innocent children in heaven, connecting to the idea in Psalms that God preserves all your tears. Suffering faced with dignity and purpose can be transformed, even sanctified.
And guilt. How does that fit into tragic optimism?
Guilt isn't just a dead end. It's an opportunity, a chance to change yourself for the better, to learn, to grow, to take responsibility and choose differently next time.
And death, the ultimate limit.
Death gives life urgency. Because every moment is transient, each of the moments of which life consists is dying. It makes how we use each moment incredibly important. That's where his imperative comes in. Live as if you were living for the second time and had acted as wrongly the first time as you are about to act now.
Wow. Talk about raising the stakes on our choices.
Reframes everything, and he pushes back against pitying the old. Their lives aren't empty, they're full. Full of realities in the past, deeds done, loves experienced, suffering overcome. These are stored in the granaries of the past, irrevocably treasured. Having been is the surest kind of being. Young people should envy that realized potential.
Which leads to his fierce critique of valuing people based only on usefulness.
A dangerous path, he warned. Society's achievement orientation loves the young, the successful, the productive. But if we equate human dignity only with present usefulness, well, he says bluntly, you're logically on the path towards justifying euthanasia for the unproductive or disabled, just like the Nazis did. It's a chilling reminder of where that thinking leads. Human dignity must be inherent, not earned by utility.
In this kind of nihilism, this meaninglessness can be taught, even unintentionally.
He worried about that. Therapists or educators who promote cynicism, who tell people it's all random, nothing matters, don't take yourself seriously. Frankl saw that as deeply harmful. The role should be to immunize against nihilism, not inoculate with it. Foster hope and the search for meaning.
So underlying all of this is Frankl's absolute belief in human freedom and responsibility.
Unshakable freedom. Not freedom from conditions we're always subject to biology, psychology, society. But freedom to take a stand toward those conditions. Man determines himself, Frankl insists. We choose whether to get in or rise above.
And he felt qualified to say this because
he lived it. I am a professor in two fields. I am fully aware of conditions, but I'm also a survivor of four camps. And I bear witness to the unexpected extent to which man is capable of defying and braving even the worst conditions conceivable. His life was his evidence.
He called belief in total determinism that we're just products of our conditions neurotic fatalism.
Yeah, he saw it as not just wrong, but dangerous. It strips us of responsibility, of our power to change ourselves or our world. He insisted on our capacity for self-transcendence, our ability to grow beyond our circumstances.
Even in cases of severe mental illness.
Even then, his psychiatric credo, a residue of freedom remains even in psychosis. The innermost core isn't touched. That affirms the dignity of every human being, no matter how ill. Otherwise, he asked, why be a psychiatrist? If they're just broken machines, wouldn't euthanasia be logical? It's a radical affirmation of humanness.
You wanted to rehumanize psychiatry that saw the person behind the illness.
Exactly. Not just a mechanism, but a spiritual being capable of meaning. Which brings us to that stunning Auschwitz paradox.
Say it again.
Man is that being who invented the gas chambers of Auschwitz. However, he is also that being who entered those gas chambers upright, with the Lord's Prayer or the Shema Yisrael on his lips.
Chilling. The capacity for both extremes exists within us.
And it's our decisions, our choices, that determine which potential we actualize. Not just our conditions. That's why he joked about needing a statue of responsibility on the West Coast to balance the Statue of Liberty on the East.
Freedom and responsibility, two sides of the same coin.
Inseparable. And meaning is found not by looking inward, but by reaching outward, giving himself to a cause to serve or another person to love. That's where purpose lies.
Okay, so practically speaking, how does logotherapy help someone find this meaning?
Well, there are different approaches. Charlotte Bueller suggested studying biographies, learning from lives well lived. Frankl added his biological approach, trusting our conscience. He saw conscience not just as learned rules, but as an innate prompter, rooted in our biology, that intuitively guides us towards value and meaning in specific situations.
And techniques like paradoxical intention, that sounds interesting.
It's quite clever. Used often for anxiety or phobias. It leverages humor and self-detachment. Say someone has insomnia because they're terrified of not sleeping. The logotherapist might tell them, okay, tonight, try to stay awake as long as possible.
The opposite of what they want.
Exactly. The fear of not sleeping creates this intense effort, hyper-intention, that actually prevents sleep. By paradoxically intending the opposite, you break the cycle. The anxiety dissolves, and often sleep just happens naturally. It helps the person laugh at themselves, detached from the neurotic pattern.
Using humor to break the cycle. Neat. So, logotherapy isn't about forcing a specific meaning onto someone?
Not at all. Frankl stressed it was undogmatic. He used the analogy of a supermarket, not an Oriental bazaar. In a supermarket, you see what's offered, you take what you find useful, what resonates with you. You're not pressured into buying anything specific. He wanted to foster independent, creative spirits, not just disciples repeating his words.
What an incredible journey through this book and Frankl's thought. Let's try to wrap up the core takeaways. His central message seems to be:
life always has potential meaning. Under any conditions, period. Even in the absolute depths of misery. It's not guaranteed, but the potential is always there.
And the key to unlocking that potential is our inner freedom.
Our freedom to choose our attitude. That's the one thing that can never be taken away. And this leads to tragic optimism, saying yes to life, finding meaning in suffering, guilt, and death when they're unavoidable.
Finding our why is crucial.
It's fundamental. That's what allows us to bear almost any how.
And meaning isn't passive. It's found through responsibility.
Through action. Through loving someone. Through creating something. Through the courage we show in suffering. It's an active response to life's questions.
And these ideas, born from the concentration camps, they're still incredibly relevant, aren't they? The existential vacuum
may be more relevant than ever. Think about the rates of depression, anxiety, addiction, the search for meaning in a secular age, the feeling of drift many people experience. Frankl's analysis feels incredibly contemporary. His work invites us to examine our own pneumo dynamic.
That tension between who we are and who we could be.
Yeah. Are we challenging ourselves enough? Are we reaching for meaning? Or are we settling for comfort and avoiding the necessary tension of growth?
He shows us that even small choices matter. Small acts of choosing responsibility, choosing dignity, choosing love, they can restore meaning even when everything seems lost. His life is the ultimate proof.
It truly is, an enduring testament to the human spirit's resilience.
So, as we finish, maybe we should leave our listeners with Frankl's own words from a lecture he gave much later, in 1983.
Powerful words, he said. Since Auschwitz, we know what man is capable of. And since Hiroshima, we know what is at stake.
A stark reminder of both our capacity for evil and the precariousness of our existence. And he followed with a challenge, didn't he?
He did. He said, the world is in a bad state, but everything will become still worse unless each of us does his best. And he urged people to join the minority of decent people actively striving to make meaningful choices.
A call to action, a call to responsibility, a truly profound thought to end on. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into man's search for meaning.
Oh, yeah.
We hope it's given you much to think about in your own search.